Do people have a right to affordable housing in a big city? Do they have a right to affordable housing? Period. Well, a developer from Montreal in the article I'm about to read, he doesn't believe so. In fact, he says if people can't afford it, they should not live in the city. The city is made for the privileged. Oof, shots fired. Let's get into it. Here we go. I can already hear, we've got to have we just need more housing. We need more affordable housing. We just need more housing. Ain't going to happen, folks. Not going to happen. City after city after city has proven that they are not capable of providing affordable housing. It just doesn't happen unless there is a massive amount of taxes a long time ago to create a situation where you've got all these, basically in other countries, in Canada and in throughout all North America, invariably what you see are we talk about affordable housing and we've got programs where developers have to chip into affordable housing, but affordable housing doesn't get built. It doesn't get built. And this podcast kind of reveals why not. All right, here we go. Let's talk by Sean. Let's more reading. So 2 years after Valérie Plante administration said a new housing bylaw would lead to the construction of 600 new social housing units per year, the city hasn't seen a single one. We're talking about Montreal. Not one, not even one. The bylaw for a diverse metropolis forces developers to include social, family, and in some places, affordable housing units to any new projects larger than 4,843 square feet, which is not huge. And that's a big single family home. That's a massive single family home. But as far as affordable, an apartment complex, that's pretty small. If they don't, they must pay a fine or hand over land, buildings, or individual units for the city to turn into affordable or social housing. So the city is trying to ratchet down developers into giving them some affordable housing. But instead, the developers are basically writing a check. They're paying a fine, giving it to the city. And then you know what the city does? Nothing, because that's what cities do. Yeah, nothing. Nothing happened because their planning wasn't good enough. They're not collecting enough money to actually go out and build a project. Weird. And that happens all over. I mean, Seattle, you betcha. So many of the projects that are out there are built because developers pay into an affordable housing fund that doesn't really build much in the way of affordable housing. Because affordable housing in a market like Seattle, it's a no-go. It's like the developer said. It's for people who can afford it. So that's why I talk more and more about class warfare. You've got the haves and the have-nots. If you don't have any money, you can't afford to live in the city, move further out, period. That's the hardcore reality. If you want to keep living in closer proximity to wherever you're working, either get a new job, move out, go find another city, make it work. But expecting the city or expecting a governmental entity to provide affordable housing for you, I think, those days are long gone. It's just, it's long gone. You're going to have some variants of that. You're going to have some senior housing. You're going to have some kind of stuff like that. But current construction of so much of this, it's a no-go. Actually, so I need to turn that on so you guys can read it. Sorry about that. So if they don't pay the fee, they must, if they don't either give them some land, they got to pay a fine. According to data released by Ensemble Montreal, the city's official opposition, and reviewed by CBC News, there have been 150 new projects by private developers, creating a total of 7,100 housing units since the bylaw came into effect April of 2021. None of the units have been made into affordable housing. Zero. Nada. And with all the developers of those projects opting instead to give Montreal financial compensation, only 550 units are big enough to be considered family housing. 5 developers ceded a piece of the property to the city instead of creating affordable housing. All right, so they gave them something, but not enough to build on, right? Because you're not going to give a big, huge piece of land. You're going to give a little strip. You're going to give them something. You're going to give them, leftovers for the dog. That's what you're going to give them. And you're going to write a little check and you're going to say, hey, thanks so much for participating. I made some good money. I'm off to my next project, because that's how developers work. And if without those developers, you wouldn't have any new housing at all. So people whining about affordable housing, hey, big city, you got to pay to play. So if you don't pay, you ain't going to play, move on to the next city. That's kind of where we sit. The money from the fees paid by developers goes into either the city's affordable housing fund, which usually gets squandered, or its social housing fund, which definitely gets squandered. Those fees have so far amounted to a total of $24.5 million, not enough to develop a single social housing project, according to housing experts. So, yeah, the problem is if they increase those fines higher and higher, you're going to entice fewer and fewer developers to actually do anything, because their risk isn't going to be, where they want it to sit for investing. They're going to move on to another city where they've got better margin. That's just how it goes. So cities have to be competitive as well. But the fact that there's no affordable housing coming out of this, not shocking at all. So these numbers are catastrophic, said Julien Hinault-Ritel, city councilor for Mercier, Hochelaga, Maisonneuve. I don't know what that is, but whatever. With Ensemble Montreal. The housing affordability crisis in Montreal is getting worse month by month. We're seeing families all over Montreal who can't afford housing. It's going to take concrete actions, and fast. Not by the government. It's going to take concrete actions by those families to recognize this probably isn't a city that's affordable for us anymore. And they move on. Somebody moves into their spot, and this whole thing continues. That's what you've got going on. Don't expect governmental entities to create anything, because we're literally watching this unfold in front of us. All right, so you collected $24.5 million and you haven't built a damn thing with that, and you're not going to be able to, because $24.5 million doesn't go anywhere. You got a big zero. You got a goose egg there, whatever. So the city of Montreal had promised in 2021 to release the 2-year results of the bylaw by early 2023, but it hasn't done so. I wonder why not. How come? Why aren't we being transparent? Where is the transparency here? I need things to be more inclusive, and I need more transparency. I need you to tell the truth. Oh, yeah, these numbers aren't good. Therefore, just don't release them. See if anybody notices. Don't release them. And that's how this whole article came out, right? Hey, they haven't built a damn one single unit and collected all this money. What have they done? Well, yeah. So, but Ensemble Montreal said it completed the data itself using the city's open data. It's calling for Plante's administration to disclose what it plans to do with the 5 new plots and $24.5 million. Well, it's government. It's going to take them a long time to figure that out. And then they're going to screw it up 10 ways from you know what. And, then they'll come back around, and then they won't have another report when they said they're going to. And we'll have some other entity go, hey, you said you were going to report to us. Well, those numbers are even worse than the ones back from beginning of 2023. Therefore, mum's the word. That's what you got going on. Benoit Dorias, the vice chair of Montreal's executive committee and the member responsible for housing, said the 2-year review would be ready this fall, despite being promised this spring, despite your opposition already coming up with the numbers. They've already been released. Don't worry. Don't worry about it there, Jack. Or Benoit, sorry. Numbers have already been released, and you blew it. And so now I'm podcasting on it. Some dude from Seattle. The city stresses the bylaw isn't its only tool to make housing more affordable. Okay. No. However, doesn't look like this is going in the right direction, does it? It's been acquiring land and buildings for housing projects, simplifying approval for real estate projects, and working with other parties. Otherwise, what we're saying here is we are reimagining and rethinking what affordable housing would look like. We're thinking about it. I mean, we're acquiring. We got some money coming in. We're going to do something. We're going to do something. We'll let you know. We'll let you know by the beginning of 2024. That comes and goes, and nothing happens. The bylaw is a non-negotiable social contract we have with the population. It's a commitment to build the city and our neighborhoods differently, where everyone has a place, regardless of their wallet. That's what you're saying. The harsh reality is it'll never work. There's no such thing as affordable housing in a big city. There's just not. It doesn't exist. Things are expensive. That's why it's the big city. That's why you've got all the economic opportunities for businesses to come in, and people with really good paying jobs can afford, what everybody else considers not affordable. One of my last podcasts was in the state of California, only 16% of all the residents of California can afford a median priced home. Not a great home, but one that is literally in the middle of the data array. Half of it's less expensive and half of it's more expensive. Only 16%. You got to make $208,000 right now to afford a median priced home in all of California on average. That's not affordable. There's no affordable housing. Montreal, you don't have any affordable housing. Big city, it's not going to happen. Just not happening. So Plante defended the bylaw on Monday. She argued that developers would be more likely to build social housing if the Quebec government was willing to provide any new money to support new projects, something it hasn't done. No, because it's going to take so much money to make it go. And things are so expensive. Your land acquisition is so expensive. Financing is expensive, especially in today's market, right? Most markets have come to an absolute grinding halt on the construction of new apartments. And so what's going to happen is after a while, you're going to have an absorption of what little inventory is out there. And without any new construction of apartments, you're going to have a massive rise in rents. That's going to happen all over. That is an inevitable byproduct of what we're going through right now, is this tightening of the credit markets and the increase in interest rates. You don't have stuff being built that we need to have supply coming on board. It's not there. Therefore, your rents are going to go through the roof. I mean, if you think that there's some families that are complaining now about being lack of affordable, I mean, the stuff that we saw after the pandemic, as far as rent increases goes on, it's going to look like child play. Because you got a supply and demand balance issue, and it's wildly out of whack. Premier Francois Legault has argued that there is enough money in the pipeline to build existing projects, but given that they are so slow to complete, it's fruitless to give more. All right, so we're saying the same thing. Affordable housing isn't a viable concept in a big city like Montreal. It's just not. It's not happening. The Quebec government has its foot on the brake, Plante said. We're not going to throw the bylaw in the garbage because it's a great planning tool. There you go. All right, you're planning, you're reimagining, you're rethinking, but you ain't building anything there, sporty. The issue is that the government is not financing social housing anymore. Huh, how come? Do you think they might have some budget deficits moving forward? Do you think that might be reality? Do you think that maybe you can't rely upon the government for financing of housing projects? Yeah. You're relying on private party developers. That's who builds everything. And they're going to write their little check, and you're going to deposit in your little social fund, and everybody's going to move on. And unfortunately, the only people that can afford new construction apartments are people with good jobs. And the vast majority of folks may not have those good jobs. They may not be able to afford it. And that is that's the process we're in. So, when you talk about, we just need more affordable housing, good luck with that. It's not happening. Just not happening. Right? And, we need more housing. Montreal housing groups say they are not surprised by the lack of cooperation from developers. If we wanted real policy that will fight gentrification, why are we fighting gentrification? That's just a natural evolution of the real estate market. What was once really great, it sometimes devolves, and what's once really bad sometimes gets better based upon different market circumstances. Gentrification, everybody is always fighting gentrification, but that is the new emerging market. That's what that is. We gotta fight gentrification. Why? So it can be affordable for everybody? That's not how this game works. Just not. Sorry, folks. We would have had a stricter rule from the get-go to force developers to cede property or include social housing. Right. But the problem is that if you make them cede too much property or build too much social housing, they're not going to build anything at all. And then you're hosed. Kind of like what we've got going on right now in many, many markets. You don't have construction of apartments going up because it's too expensive, costs too much, and the interest carry is too much. It's not a viable deal, right? You need for things to kind of come down a little bit. So if the option of a financial compensation is there, developers will take it. If not, you know what they're going to say? Nah, moving on to the next whatever project, wherever. Developer Nicolae Padula agrees and doesn't mince words when asked about developers' social responsibility. He says Montreal isn't a good city for investing in property. Huh. All right. And that's what we're kind of talking about. These numbers don't make sense. And for developers, they've really got to make sense because they crunch them 10 ways from some days. They just, this is their livelihood. And if they blow it, unlike the government, when real estate developers blow it, they go under, and they don't want to do that because money's involved. And that's what this is all about. Massive amounts of money. And that's how real estate development has always gone, right? So why isn't Montreal good for investing? Because construction costs are high. There's too much regulation, and developers like him seek as much profit as possible. The end game isn't to give everybody a house. The end game isn't to give everybody cheap rent. If the government wants to subsidize that, which they're really bad at doing, then that's on them. They can do that. But we pay for the government, right? So it's either got to make sense or it doesn't. So with the developers, people always want to hammer on the greedy developers. Well, they're the ones that build your housing. So you're going to have to deal with it. Whether they're crooked or not, those are the people that you're dependent upon for housing. And when you don't have that housing built, watch your rent go through the roof even further than what you've seen through the pandemic. That is what will happen, period. So we can look back at this podcast and go, oh, yeah, good Lord, that happened. Padula is already frustrated with tenants' rights protection in Quebec. And that's what's driving people out from Seattle as well. Same thing. You got some Looney Tunes socialist, I got to plug my merch here. Socialism works for those who don't. You can buy that on our merch. How about that? Socialism works for those who don't. I mean, truer words have never been said, right? Because if you don't work, socialism, let's go with that. I don't have to do anything. Take from the rich, give to the poor. It's all good. Montreal should pay developers the profit they would lose. This is what the guy says after saying, if people can't afford it, get the F out. Kind of hardcore, but I mean, it's the brutal reality, right, that we live in with expensive big cities. Montreal should pay developers the profit they would lose by making housing more affordable or do it themselves. But governmental entities can't because they screw that up so badly. He said, because if it's just us, meaning the developers, who have to swallow the pill, it will not work out, meaning they will not participate and you will get no housing built. So if you want to work under those circumstances, all right, just roll the dice and see how that goes. The city would have to buy the land. They would have to hire contractors. City would have to buy the land. They would have to hire the contractors and do it themselves and take on the responsibility to manage the building. Why would it be up to me as the developer? He's 100% right. The developer has one quest, and that is not to build social housing. That is not to build affordable housing. It is to build for a profit, period. Anything else, and you are just kidding yourself. How these greedy developers. Yeah. That's what makes this work. Greed is good. Gordon Gekko, right? Greed is good. Oh, no, we don't want that. We want to have a lot of housing so everybody can just live like we're in Narnia and it's all good. I don't subscribe to that at all. Sorry, just don't. It's not the way the world works. If you want to live in some utopia where socialism works for those who don't, then I'd suggest you go find that market. It ain't here in Seattle. It ain't here in Quebec. It ain't there in Montreal, right? So Access Logics, the province's social housing fund, has only enough money to complete projects already in the works, And the Quebec government said last winter that it will be replaced with a program more attractive to private developers. The stuff that goes on with government versus business is absolutely shocking to me. Like this story, you got 24,000 families on waiting lists for social housing in Montreal, and over 100 tenants were without housing July 1st. Yeah, I mean, things are expensive. Things have gotten more expensive. You've got inflation. Housing costs has gone through the roof. Interest rates have gone through the roof. Cost of food has gone through the roof. Yeah. So don't expect real estate developers to fund that difference. So we'll end up with one last quote here. We cannot count on the goodwill of private developers. Why should developers have goodwill? They're in it to make money. They're in it to be solvent, because if they're not, they won't build any more houses, right? So, but we also can't give them the keys to the city, she said. That's that fine line, giving them enough incentive to build, but not too much incentive where they're basically taking whatever little money is going to go into social projects that is out there. I blame a lot of this on mismanagement by governmental entities. That's why that's why in the big cities where you've got this big push for land acquisition, in the big cities, you've got massive amounts of regulation, because everything has such an expensive cost to it that they know they can tag everything, they can tax everything. And then when you go to build something, it's just years and years of just cluster. Down in San Francisco, you've literally, I did a podcast on this not long ago, you've literally got developers giving back the keys to their projects when it's 99% done, because the city of San Francisco is so slow to issue a certificate of occupancy that between the time when they got it done in 2021 to the time now, the numbers don't pencil, and it's not worth nearly what it was when they finished it. So now they're in a position where they're like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We can't sell it and make a profit. We can't rent it out and make that go. They're handing the keys back to the bank, and the bank's going to have to discount it massively, bring somebody else in to manage it until they can get it moved on. But in the meantime, that's an example of a governmental entity just flubbing things up so badly that, private money, private developers, it's a no-go. And so if you've got your own money on the line and you're going to be risking it to build for profit, if you got the option between writing a little check to go into a fund or giving them a little chunk of land, giving them, the scraps left over for the dog, or building some units. All right, here you go. Here's one of my 8 units. You can just go ahead and have it. I'm sure you'll manage it right. Yeah, not much of that going on, is there? No, because that little check, it makes sense to the developer. They can actually pencil that in. They know what that looks like. They also know what the value of that little dirt track that, they gave to the city in exchange for not having to write that check. They know what that worth is. It's not much, but the city's going to make it into a park or whatever. The city's going to build some affordable housing on it, which they haven't done. And that's where you sit. And that's why you've got no affordable housing in big cities, because it all gets mucked up. And that's not even to really talk about acquisition cost. When you've got acquisition cost of a couple $100,000 per lot for tiny little lots in Seattle, and that's if you can find it at that. Maybe you're buying a big plot and you're breaking it up and you're going to have a bunch of development costs. You're taking on some real risk. So we got all these namby-pambies saying, you need more affordable housing. Well, if it was your millions on the line, and if that project didn't make sense, you're not going to build any affordable housing either. So, it cuts both ways. And I deal with developers and I deal with builders, and I have for many, many years on the appraisal end of things. So that's where I see things. So my piece in this puzzle is that I'm a tool for the bank to use to measure what they are lending to an individual developer, if it makes sense for them to lend the money. That's what my appraisal work goes towards. And in so many of these projects that are based on, oh, we're just going to build the greatest project with all this social nonsense, those don't pencil. And lenders pass on them because they don't pencil. And that's the bottom line. You got to have profit. Otherwise, this does not make sense because there's nobody propping up these builders, in current market day conditions. It's just not happening. So like the developer says, if you can't afford it, move out. Cities for the privileged. That might seem a little bit harsh, but it's also reality. So do with that what you will. But I think that's a more accurate portrayal of what you've got going on than this whole concept of where's all the social housing? Where's all the affordable housing? We need more affordable housing. You ain't getting none. You're not getting any in the future. Deal with what you got going on right now. And that's reality. There you go. All right. Thanks so much for being here. I will catch up with you on the next one. Bye for now.